1983. It was a thriller of a year where we would see many highs and lows. From the ugly side of the Cabbage Patch Kids craze to the first man to moonwalk on TV, and a mohawk man with a bad attitude who would pity a fool. While every breath you would take would feel like somebody was watching you, there were some good clean moments.
Fresh and clean as a whistle. That's Irish Spring.
Today, we're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment and all that was weird in the 80s. This is Timeline. Today, we're on to 1983. But before we get going, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what 80s story you would like to hear more about. Okay then, are you ready to see 83?
Say hello to my little friend!
Good enough for us. This is 1983. We start off with sports. The new United States Football League, or USFL if you're saving time, held its first player draft in New York on January 4th. While the USFL had first crack at all incoming collegiate football players, the incoming rookies shied away from the new league, which was not good news for the league. Dan Marino was drafted in the first round as the first pick by the Los Angeles Express. He declined LA's offer and months later signed with the Miami Dolphins. The USFL would go on for 3 seasons, folding in 1986 after a failed antitrust lawsuit against the NFL, which was led by New Jersey Generals owner Donald J. Trump. A notable weird birth. South Korea says that Kim Jong-un was born on January 8, 1983. North Korean government officials insist that the year was actually 1982. American records show that the year was actually 84. This is the kind of uncertainty that consistently follows North Korea's supreme leader. Kim Jong-un succeeded his late father, Kim Jong-il, in 2011. He also made a friend for life with Dennis Rodman in 2013. With ties to casinos in Las Vegas, Cuba, the Bahamas, and London, Meyer Lansky became one of the most financially successful gangsters in American history. At his peak, Lansky was worth an estimated $20 million. That's over $200 million adjusted for inflation. When he died of lung cancer on January 15, 1983, Lansky had $57,000 to his name.
Maybe you can hire the A-team.
I love it when a plan comes together.
We turn to some tragic music news. Karen Carpenter collapsed in her bedroom at her parents' home in Downey, California on February 4th after years of struggling with anorexia. Paramedics found Carpenter alive, but her heart was only beating once every 10 seconds. She died a couple of hours later at Downey Community Hospital. An autopsy attributed her death to emetine abuse, an ingredient used to induce vomiting. Staying with music. Released as a single 8 months before her 5th studio album, Faster Than the Speed of Night, Bonnie Tyler unleashed the anthemic Total Eclipse of the Heart on February 11th. Written by Jim Steinman, the composer who would go on to write chart-topping power ballads for Meatloaf, Air Supply, and Celine Dion. Total Eclipse of the Heart went on to #1 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 on September 30th, 1983. Staying with pop music, it took 3 months for Michael Jackson's Thriller to touch #1 on the Billboard 200, but once it was there, it stayed for 37 weeks in a row. The record-breaking #1 streak began on February 26th and ended on April 14th, 1984, when the Footloose soundtrack knocked Jackson out of the top spot. Of course, Thriller has staying power. It never left the Billboard 200. Thriller is still on the Billboard 200 chart today. Go ahead, check. We'll wait. Told ya. Channel now to network TV, and after 11 seasons, MASH ended its run with Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen. The series finale was so highly anticipated, CBS sold commercial space in 30-second blocks for $450,000, even more than what NBC was charging for Super Bowl ad space that year. MASH still holds the title for the most watched episode of any television series with a total audience of 121.6 million people. The 2-hour series finale was the most watched television broadcast in American history until 2010 when Super Bowl 44 came around. For some fashion news, and finally, Swiss design for the people. The plastic Swatch debuted in Zurich, Switzerland on March 1, 1983, when watchmaker Nicholas Hayek responded to the decline in sales of costly Swiss watches. The low price of $40 meant anyone could afford a Swiss timepiece. Nowadays, a Keith Haring Swatch fetches over $1,000 on the collector's circuit. Now for some weird weather. On the morning of March 1, 1983, Los Angeles got hit by a surprise tornado. The twister destroyed homes, cars, businesses, and even ripped off a good chunk of the LA Convention Center's roof. The tornado's path paralleled the 110 freeway for close to 4 miles, tearing a half-mile wide gash through downtown LA, killing 9 people, seriously injuring 30 more, and flattening 150 buildings. Turning to technology, the first commercial CD player, the iconic Sony CDP-101, beep boop bop beep beep boop, made its first appearance in Japan on October 1, 1982. Unfortunately, everyone else in the world had to wait until March 19, 1983 to play their $17 compact discs. But after 100 years of popping vinyl and warped tape, Sirius audiophiles were more than thrilled with the $1,000 price tag for crisp, clean sound with no noise interference, even if the sound was a bit hollow and tinny. In a nationwide television address, President Ronald Reagan announced his proposal for the Strategic Defense Initiative on March 23rd. Reagan claimed that the missile defense system would protect the United States from ballistic nuclear missiles. The following day, the Washington Post quoted an angry Senator Ted Kennedy, who said Reagan's defense proposal was reckless Star Wars schemes. The program's nickname, Star Wars, stuck. Over 10 years, the government spent around $30 billion on developing Reagan's Star Wars, but the program went nowhere. If you were watching it live on March 25th, you remember exactly where you were when Michael Jackson moonwalked across the Civic Auditorium in Pasadena, California. The occasion was Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever, a televised special to celebrate Motown's 25 years in the music business. When Michael Jackson slid across the stage during the guitar break in Billie Jean, it was as if time froze for a second.
Cream eggs from Cadbury. Why, they're the best thing to come along since the Easter Bunny, and when he's gone, they're gone.
We now go to Japan, and after 5 years of planning and construction, Tokyo Disneyland opened on April 15th, the first Disney park to be built outside the United States. Turning to the Middle East, the first embassy suicide bombing occurred in Beirut, Lebanon, on April 18th. The attack killed 32 Lebanese, 17 Americans, and 14 passers-by. It was the deadliest attack on a U.S. diplomatic mission up to that time. In music news, McKinley Morganfield, more commonly known as Muddy Waters, died on April 30th, 1983, at the age of 70. If you're wondering how influential Waters was, consider that the Rolling Stones named themselves after his song Rollin' Stone. And Brian May, Jimi Hendrix, and Angus Young all cited Muddy as one of their biggest influences.
The wrong computer.
Shall we play a game?
How could I ask you that?
How about global thermonuclear war?
On June 18th, NASA astronaut Sally Ride became the first American woman in space when she launched with her 4 crewmates aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger. During a pre-launch press conference, Ride dealt with questions like, will the flight affect your reproductive organs? And do you weep when things go wrong on the job? No one's exactly sure when the Catholic priest James Carney died in Honduras, but records and interviews estimate it to be sometime in July of '83. After being ordained in 1961, Carney was sent to minister to impoverished Hondurans. He eventually became chaplain for the Revolutionary Party of Central American Workers. As the Honduran Army's elite Battalion 316 closed in on the Revolutionary Party, it's reported that Carney was captured, tortured, and thrown to his death from a helicopter. His remains have never been found. Originally titled Black and White and developed for Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder, Trading Places premiered on June 8, 1983. If this featured extra looks familiar, that's Giancarlo Esposito. Giancarlo struck villain gold as Gus Fring, who would first appear on Breaking Bad on May 17, 2009. It was a banner day on July 14, 1983, for an Italian-American plumber. That was the day that Nintendo unleashed Mario Brothers in Japan. North America would get the game about a week later on July 20th. Some weird historical weather? The coldest natural temperature ever recorded at ground level on Earth was minus 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit. For those of you outside of the US, that's negative 89.2 degrees Celsius. The big freeze happened on July 21st, 1983, at the Soviet Vostok station in Antarctica. And at that temperature, it would only take a few breaths of air to induce hemorrhaging in your lungs, which would lead to a quick death. To sports, and an afternoon game on July 24th, 1983. George Brett hit a 2-run dinger against the Yankees. The only problem for Brett was that his bat's handle was covered in pine tar, and Yankees head coach Billy Martin called it out to the umpires. The umps disallowed the home run, and that's when Brett went ape. Speaking of apes, a black baboon, the first non-human primate conceived in a laboratory dish, was born at the Southwest Foundation for Research and Education in San Antonio, Texas on July 25th. The female baby, named E.T. for embryo transfer, was born 6 months after its test tube fertilization and, coincidentally, on the 5th birthday of Louise Brown, the first human conceived in vitro. For those of you in the regions of America who didn't get their MTV yet, there was Friday Night Videos. The weekly show debuted on July 29th, and it was a godsend for those whose parents didn't want to spring for basic cable yet. The show hung on for 17 years before NBC aired its final episode on December 29, 2000. In a joint initiative between then LAPD Chief Daryl Gates and the Los Angeles Unified School District, the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program made its debut on September 5th. D.A.R.E. was a program designed to keep teenagers off of drugs and alcohol. Some of the earliest studies of D.A.R.E.'s effectiveness exposed D.A.R.E. as being a pretty ineffective program. Turns out teenagers don't like the learn by riveting PowerPoint presentation and prefer the do it and see if we die kind of approach. Back to music. Lucky Star, the 4th single off Madonna's eponymous debut album, was released on September 8, 1983. Madonna initially didn't want to release Lucky Star as a single, but she was in the middle of being sued and needed the money. Warner Brothers executive Jeff Ayeroff, the guy who greenlit Madonna's career, told her to allow him to release the song to earn extra royalties. Ayeroff was right. Lucky Star was Madonna's highest-ranking single on the Billboard Hot 100 off her debut LP.
Yo, Joe!
We'll fight for freedom wherever there's trouble. G.I. Joe is there. G.I. Joe, American hero.
Get to the citizenship! A few months after he finished filming The Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger took the plunge and became a naturalized U.S. citizen on September 17th. He became one of the rare Americans who also has Austrian rights, as Austria rarely allows dual citizenship. 20 years later, on November 17, 2003, Arnold would use his citizenship to become the Governator, being elected the 38th governor of the state of California. Vanessa Williams was the most talked about woman in the world when she became the first African-American Miss USA winner on September 17th. In a 1984 issue of Penthouse, the world saw a nude 19-year-old Williams in what became the magazine's most profitable issue ever. Miss USA pageant officials forced Williams to resign. Vanessa would save the best for last when... We flash forward to January 14th, 1992, when Williams would rebound with the release of the song Save the Best for Last, which would make it up to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 list. If you're familiar with the phrase 2 and 2, you've probably seen at least one episode of Love Connection. The dating game show, hosted by Chuck Woolery, who coined the phrase, debuted on September 19th. It was one of the most popular game shows of the 80s, but on July 1st, 1994, after 2,120 shows, Woolery 2 and 2'd for the last time. All in all, Chuck Woolery conducted 35,478 interviews, which produced 31 marriages and 20 children. Now for a notable 1983 moment. With an estimated worth of $2.2 billion, Gordon Getty was ranked the richest man in America according to Forbes in its second annual Forbes 400 list, which was published on September 28, 1983. How did he earn his money? The American way, of course. His father, the late billionaire oil tycoon John Paul Getty, gave him a boost. Today, Gordon is still worth what he was in 1983, $2 billion large. Only now, he's the 212th richest person in the United States. Oof, that poor, poor billionaire. Turning to the theater, on September 21st, David Mamet's Pulitzer Prize-winning Glengarry Glen Ross made its world premiere on the stage of the Royal National Theatre in London. A film adaptation of Mamet's play debuted on October 2, 1992, with an expanded script and a new role, Blake, specifically written for Alec Baldwin.
I've been in this business 15 years.
What's your name?
You! That's my name! You know why, mister? because you drove a Hyundai to get here tonight. I drove an $80,000 BMW. That's my name.
Here's something you didn't realize about the 80s. The world almost experienced Armageddon on September 26, 1983. But thanks to Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov of the Soviet Air Defense Forces, you're here watching this video instead. The near-nuclear annihilation happened several weeks after the downing of Korean Airlines Flight 007 over Soviet airspace. An early warning system near Moscow reported the launch of 6 American missiles. Convinced that the U.S. would come at Russia with more than just 6 ICBMs, Petrov halted a retaliatory strike which would have resulted in an immediate and irrevocable escalation to full-scale nuclear war. Flash forward to 1988 when Petrov's actions were finally revealed. Phew! Thank you, Petrov. That was close.
Jonathan Chase, master of the secrets that divide man from animal. Animal from man. Manimal.
A notable ending. The hand-cranked telephone died on October 11, 1983 in the village of Bryant Pond, Maine. While the rest of America was on to rotary and push-button phones by November 18, 1963, Bryant Pond was proud of the fact that it was the last city to fully convert. We go now to South America, some 100 miles north of Venezuela. The United States Marines and a coalition of 6 Caribbean nations attacked the tiny island nation of Grenada at dawn on October 25th. The invasion, codenamed Operation Urgent Fury, resulted in an Allied victory within a little more than a week. Nearly 20 years after it was introduced to Congress, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill marking the 3rd Monday of January as Martin Luther King Jr. Day on November 3rd. Of course, the holiday wouldn't kick in for a few more years. So on January 20th, 1986, America celebrated Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Although by that time, 17 states were already recognizing their own King holiday.
The quarterback. Billy Sims, the deep back, and the toss to Sims. Coming to the near sideline. Cuts upfield. Hurdles over a couple of people.
Oh my goodness, did you see that? He hit Steve Brown with what looked like a karate kick.
While there were signs of mania leading up to it, the Cabbage Patch Kids hysteria began on November 25th, better known to us as Black Friday. Parents would travel hundreds of miles to a toy store if they heard a rumor that a new shipment of Cabbage Patch dolls came in. Coleco's inability to keep up with consumer demand caused fistfights and riots across the United States. The Great Cabbage Patch Kids doll scare of '83 was also the first instance of holiday hysteria that's become a part of America's holiday tradition since. Freddie Heineken became a free man on November 30th after being kidnapped 3 weeks earlier. Heineken, CEO of Heineken Beer, as well as one of the richest people in the Netherlands, was released on a ransom of 35 million Dutch guilders. That's 17,495,961 American dollars. Adjusted for inflation, Heineken's freedom cost a bit over $45 million. It took the 5 kidnappers 5 years to plan the job, and it was the highest ever paid for a kidnap victim at the time. The kidnappers were eventually caught and sent to prison. Crime does pay, you just can't keep it. If you had cable and you were around a TV on December 2nd, you were watching Thriller's debut. John Landis, 16 months after the deaths on his Twilight Zone set, directed the $900,000 video on 35mm film. Former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld met with Saddam Hussein on December 20th, 1983, to show America's support for the regime despite its use of chemical weapons. The U.S. was pushing for the Iran-Iraq war to end, and Rumsfeld was sent to the Middle East to serve as a mediator and do the bidding of President Reagan. And that's how 1983 would end. 1984 was just on the horizon. It would be a year for fashion, fast food, and Olympians, but that is for next year. Until then, you can have a snack while you wait for '84 to come.
For a taste that's crispier than ever before. Mrs. Paul's crispier, crunchier fish sticks and fillets.
So what do you think? What story would you like to see a full video on? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other 80s videos from our weird history.